My name is Dale, and I want to welcome you to my channel, Observer of Anomalous Objects. So grateful that you're here. Go ahead and ask that you go ahead, hit that subscribe button. It really helped the channel out a lot. The reason I have this channel, I just want to go ahead and speak on that for a minute, is because we're all trying to do something to help bring about disclosure. And so this is my part, trying to bring on really good guests, trying to move this topic forward. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm going to go ahead and bring my guest on. This is the second time we've had him on, and then I'm going to read some bio stuff about him. But let me go ahead and welcome Matt Laslo to the show from Anomalous. Sure appreciate you being back, brother. It's really exciting. I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to do a little bio work real quick here. But there's our one and only Matt Laslo. Great picture of you there. Here's the one that blew me away, though, brother. This is the one that absolutely blew me away. This is your picture, for Johns Hopkins University. And let me just go ahead and read this for everyone. It says, talking about you, based on Capitol Hill, Matt Laslo is a reporter who has been covering campaigns in every aspect of federal policy since 2006. He's currently a contributor at Vice News, Wired, The Daily Beast, Playboy, and a correspondent with Vice News Tonight. While he has filed stories for NPR and more than 40 of its affiliates, he has also written for Rolling Stone, The Atlantic, Campaigns and Election magazines, the Chattanooga Times Free Press, The Guardian, the Omaha World Herald, and the Washingtonian Magazine. Since 2009, he sat on the board at the Regional Reporters Association, where he helps represent the dwindling numbers of regional reporters based in Washington. In 2001, he graduated cum laude from Johns Hopkins University with an MA in Government and Public Policy program. He now teaches there as an adjunct political communication professor, as well as teaching journalism at Boston University and the University of Maryland, and at George Washington's MA program in strategic public relations. Oh my goodness! But I
call it the MA. I call it the MA and BS.
Okay,
don't tell.
But that's not the end. I want everybody to see this. This is our Matt Laslo at work right here. He's kind of like Superman. You're in that old phone booth there. Do they even have those anymore?
Yeah, that's in the Capitol House side, actually right outside of where they picked Speaker Johnson to be the next speaker. Wow. So yeah, it's still there.
I love it though. Look at you at work here. And then this is the classic look for you, Matt. And I know what you're doing. You're trying to bring back this look that Veronica Lake made famous many, many years ago. And in fact, just covering that one eye up just was kind of like a fashion statement. And brother, I know that's what you're doing. Yeah, there you go. You're bringing it back. You're bringing it back. That's a new fashion statement. Everything old is new again.
This was longer until I think last week we had our Johns Hopkins May term. It's not May, obviously, but it's like their summer May term thing. And so I had my two deans with me on Capitol Hill. So I scheduled a quick snippety snip with my stylist, my buddy. He's an old punk rock buddy. So we trimmed it a little bit lower just so I could look a little professional.
Yeah, well, you're rocking the look, though. I mean, they should accept that. But I've been there. I've been to colleges and universities, and I know that they kind of have a little bit of a standard that maybe the rest of us don't usually follow.
Oh, they can handle it. Fucking Congress can't. But as I told Daryl Issa, because he's like, whoa, what's up with this? And I was like, this is to scare you all. And he goes, it's working.
You're rocking the look. You're rocking the look. Well, let me go ahead. I've got a few questions that were given by some friends of mine and the audience as well. And so I'd like to read a few of those questions to you and have you answer them if you wouldn't mind, Matt. The first question comes from a gentleman. He goes by NHI Presence at Kamalak 2003. And so he's asking this question. He says, the Vatican is now talking about the universe having more than just humans. Does Matt think they could disclose, help disclose, or were they asked by the government to prepare the religious people for disclosure? And so what's your opinion on the Vatican and their stance?
Dude, my head is so far up the ass of Congress. This is the first I'm hearing of this. But in a past life, I did study to be a pastor, and I've given sermons actually in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district.
Oh,
so
wow.
First time I met MTG, I was like, "Hey, ma'am, if this were 20 years ago, I'd be your constituent, and I'd be given sermons." And she's like, looks at me like, "Who the fuck is this MSM reporter? Got to keep them on their toes."
Yeah.
Which is where I guess Pontifex is keeping me on my toes, because I got to look into this. But yeah, whatever God says, I do.
Right. Right. You know, I'm a pastor as well, so we have that kind of connection as well.
But don't forget, I did tell Josh Hawley I saw the light and it was dark, which is why I've in the meantime or since then become a contributor at Rolling Stone, Vice, and Playboy. All the fun ones.
Yeah, all the ones that get attention anyway. Anyway, I heard about some councils or something they had where these discussions were going among the priests and stuff like that. But I don't. The one thing that I think it was.
Do you know much about that?
Well, the thing I heard was not necessarily. I heard a little bit about that, but as far as preparing people for disclosure, and I guess that's very possible that they'd obviously want to get out in front of this, but I think I was listening to Weaponized the other day, and George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell were talking about how they get a lot of flack that the government's feeding them this information as a kind of a slow disclosure. And they argued that after the AARO report, that should put that rumor to bed, because it doesn't appear that the government is, or at least some parts of the government definitely aren't trying to trickle information down to us to the point where they're trying to prepare us, for disclosure.
Well, part of me feels like Rome and the Catholic Church is the biggest thing on this planet that's anti-disclosure, at least when it comes to all their skeletons in the closet.
Right.
So maybe they're a good one to deposit your secrets with.
Yeah, and that's what
at least if they involve little boys. Oh, yeah. Too soon.
Yeah, that was definitely
also looking at you, Southern Baptist Church.
Well, like I said, it's definitely wasn't one of their better issues that has come up in recent years. But there's also
take me anywhere, especially to church.
It can't be anywhere, and that's what I said. When it comes to police officers or whatever else, people get on them, and I'm going, but. If it was a teacher that did that, you wouldn't blame every teacher for it, and so I think it's just like everywhere else in life. There's going to be good people, there's going to be bad people. Some people are going to take advantage of their positions, and others are going to do it because they want to serve God. They want to help people.
Amen.
And, to be honest, that's why I do what I do. I have no other reason. I just want to help people. I want to make a difference in the world, and the same reason I have this podcast. I want to help push disclosure forward. All right, another one of my friends.
This is a little bit of an aside, even though, as I told Josh Hawley, I saw the light and it was dark. I can never, so in a past life, way past life, when I was like 18, 19, became a cokehead, and then became homeless by the time I was 19. And I can never discount religion because of what happened, that conversion or whatever, but especially because those people in the church, Grace Community Bible Church in Roselle, Illinois, because of the way they came around me. Even though I've seen some of the worst things that humanity has to offer in the church, I've been hugged with some of the greatest love I've ever known in churches. So
we got similar stories, because that's kind of me. I went off the deep end, and just about time I was going to follow in my dad's footsteps. My wife's uncle got me to ask her out, or she actually got him to get me to ask her out, however you want to say that. But anyway, and so it really was a major turning point in my life, and so I completely understand the drugs, the alcohol, all the stuff that killed my dad by the time he was 49. I didn't want to follow in that footsteps, but. On to the show. A friend of mine, Sir Gazbo, I think everybody on X knows him as Truth Reaper 61. And, he's got this question for you. He says, question wise, and this is not just for you, this is going to be asked when I talk to Darcy Weir as well. And so this is actually for both of you. He says, I was discussing with Darcy around the acronym NHI. We both agreed that the term NHI is not accurate enough to describe the others, seeing as how anything can swim in the ocean or that flies in the sky or moves across the land, if not human, is actually NHI. You could argue that the portion intelligence, the I portion intelligence, varies greatly species to species, but it still doesn't split the others from the rest. I wonder if he had any further thoughts on that. I've heard that too, and I'll comment on it when you're done.
Well, it's interesting. Is that the phrase non-human intelligence that was used in Schumer's UAP amendment to the NDAA? Or did they use different
they didn't. They used it. They had it in there, I think, originally 121 times, but it got whittled down. But that was the term that was in there. Yes.
Yeah, and I think it was in there something like 20 times or something like that. And it was interesting because I'm a Wired magazine contributor, and that's what I teach on. I teach on at Hopkins how politicians and reporters, we kind of adapt over time to the technologies of our day and all that. And so when I was talking to Senator Rounds, kind of the lead sponsor was Schumer on that amendment, I was like, wait, the way you're defining that cannot even encapsulate AI. And he basically admitted to us at askapoll.com, ask a poll is an ask a politician. Senator Rounds was basically like, yeah. And so that's where I'm super intrigued, and I'm kind of learning in this space, the UFO space, especially on Capitol Hill, that I really need to define my terms and get lawmakers to define their terms, because learning that NHI to them encapsulated something like AI, in one sense, that kind of makes it everything and almost meaningless, because if it can encapsulate
you look like
AI,
your camera jumped off, Matt.
It's gonna pop in and out.
It's fine. I just wanted you to be aware.
No, I'm sorry, and it's being funky, and I wish I could have rebooted right before I called in, but so I'm actually sitting over here on eggshells because it's done that twice.
Well, we got your voice. Nothing else. Yeah.
Well, I know, but I'm like, at least you can hear me.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm super intrigued on NHI. And actually, here's something interesting. When we had our live listening session, askapoll.com, with Congressman Eric Burleson last week, he's a member of the UAP caucus from Missouri. Burleson was asked about NHI, and he actually had to stop the person asking and be like, hey, what is that? Remind me what that is. And it was like, oh, non-human intelligence. And so that's where it's interesting. Yes, that phrase was included in Schumer's amendment, but it's not really a part of the lingo on Capitol Hill. And I'm kind of intrigued now that Burleson heard someone ask that, and he was intrigued by the question. I'm curious if that doesn't become more a part of the conversation, at least in the Congressional UAP caucus. But yeah, Congress is a mess, and as you all know,
do you think they're using the classical terms, aliens, ETs, UAPs, UFOs, or what is the lingo they're using?
Well, that's what I'm kind of learning. So when I say UAPs to, say, Senator Mark Warner, he just dismisses it because he hears UFOs, ET, aliens, all that. But with him, what I'm really starting to press him on, because he just laughs us all off. And I did a thread on that with our Ask a Poll link, our Twitter handle the other day.
Yeah, I caught that.
But because Warner was starting, because I've known him, since longer than he's been in Congress. I've been covering Congress 18 years. And so I used to cover him for Virginia Public Radio and DC's NPR station, WAMU. So I know him really well. And now, like, he's moved up the ranks. He's chair of the Senate Intel Committee. And that's where it kills me seeing him roll his fucking eyes, pardon my French, but he's always rolling his eyes when I ask about this issue. So now I've realized I can't even say UAPs. I got to say, hey, what's up with these intrusions over sensitive U.S. military spaces, you know? And so once I change it and almost take away the terminology, then he's naked because he's like, oh, yeah, that's right. We got freaking balloons on my watch invading U.S. airspace. And that's where the term UAP, for one, I'd say 70-80% of Congress has no idea what the term even means, because they don't even know that NASA and all these other agencies try to like do a head fake, it seems, and change the terminology. Oh, if we stop using UFO, the people think it's something different. And so I do kind of feel like, well, because what? The DNI, or the Director of National Intelligence, they define UAP differently than NASA defines UAP. Oh, wow. It's the same term, but there's just like one word. It's anomalous versus anomaly or something like that. And so I'm like, wait. Within the government, they can't even agree on what exactly the phraseology means. And that just makes me be like, all right, all the conspiracy theorists are right. Like, the government is actively doing a head fake here. Like, I teach political communications, and yeah, I would train my students. Like, if you want to confuse the populace and have them not talk about this thing that's right here, oh, maybe call this thing 3 different things. So then we're all confused together. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting, but keep your ears open. I bet we're going to hear that word a lot more.
I heard some, and I want to ask it, and I want to include some of our viewers. I put questions up. I want to make sure that they're not big or deep, but some more comments than questions. But I heard somebody call it NHHI, which stands for non-human higher intelligence. That might be a way to distinguish it from a whale or from a bird, you know, or even, well, I don't know if you could distinguish that from AI. That might be one of the shortcomings of it. But do you think that would be helpful, or you just think it's got to be something else?
We can, next time we do this, we should spend the whole time on terminology. I studied philosophy in my undergrad, and like the whole area of philosophical hermeneutics blows my mind. You know, hermeneutics, what does this word mean? And how do we use these words? And that's where I think language can evolve over time. Language can also devolve over time, but language can be this smokescreen, or hell, language can be this beautiful bridge uniting cultures, you know, disparate things. And so that's where, especially in this space, because I have seen with lawmakers, when I tweak a word, like what it happened with Senator Gillibrand a few weeks back. She had just gotten back from her trip out west, where she was in Nevada, meeting with the Air Force and then Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. And Senator Gillibrand, I asked her about that trip when she first got back. And both the interviews are on askapol.com, and it was interesting. The first one, I forget the specifics, but the first interview was a dud. It just fell flat. And she was like, nope, all that was classified, can't talk about it. Well, so then I circled back, you know, saw her 10, 20 minutes later when she was leaving the Senate floor, and her and I were just chatting, if I remember correctly. And then I was like, oh, wait. Do you mind if I turn my mic on? Because we were just chatting casually. But I was like, that's what I was trying to ask you before, where you just fell flat. Right. And then that's where she actually divulged her fear that, as she put it, there's like constant or persistent surveillance, or there's constant or persistent intrusions around America's most sensitive sites, like nuclear sites and all this, and Air Force bases with nukes and all that. And so that's where, I'm learning, especially with different lawmakers, how are they using their language to keep these secrets from me? And then how can I, knowing that I don't have a top secret clearance, I don't have any clearance,
Right.
And so how can I dislodge them? Because all of these topics at a certain level are classified, so we can't discuss them. So that's where, another example is AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York. Anytime she leaves these SCIF briefings, her rule is a wise rule. She just goes, one of the most talkative, photogenic people in Congress. Her rule is no, zip lip. She leaves a classified briefing. Her rule is nope, not going to talk to you. Even though any other time, she loves the press corps and the press corps loves her.
Right.
Bad example, but flies on stink. It's the same symbiotic relationship. And so that's where what I've learned with AOC is then, all right, circle back in a week or two, but massage my questions so that they're not directly tied to the SCIF briefing, so that she kind of forgets, oh yeah, I can get sent to jail if I talk about what happened in there. And we don't want any of these folks to go to jail. Well, maybe a few of them. But by and large, we just want to know the information that they know.
It's wise that you're figuring out how to ask the questions in a way that they will hear you, because a lot of them won't. Let me go ahead and pull this up real quick. This is from Zonker 845, and this is talking about your battles in the past. And I love what he said. He said, Matt's experience has made him deep. By living life, by going through these storms and stuff. That's one thing I've always said. It helps me be a better pastor, because I don't judge anybody. I can't judge anybody with my past.
How could we, brother?
Yeah, exactly. Now, another one I want to show here. This is actually from my wife, and I think she must have spotted a piano or something in there. But do you play piano?
So I used to play basketball. I wish I could play piano, but I'm hoping we're going to put my thing back on. I actually have a cocaine injury. Mm-hmm. So you see one of my fingers doesn't bend.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
It's a cocaine injury. So it flicks. So I can move it. Oh, it's gross. But so I guess every finger, there's two tendons. So there's this tendon, this one ripped. And I guess it's a common football injury, but like I was 18, 17, like 3 a.m., coked out of my mind. My brother's friends got jumped. I jumped in to help break it up. And I guess in that process, broke this tendon. Ooh. Then when the officers got there, I was laying underneath my car. When they pulled me out, I was coughing up blood. So
wow.
After all that, just thought it was sprained. Like 2-3 weeks later, went to my mom and was like, Mom, all the swelling's gone, but the finger's not moving. So I would love to play piano, but I don't think you can with 9 fingers.
My wife said, ouch. We got one more and then we can go on.
And that, kids, is why you don't do bad cocaine.
That's a very good lesson there. It's a very good lesson. You have permanent scars that are behind. Diego Diaz, a good friend of mine as well. He says, cheers from Albuquerque. And so
nice.
Cheers to you, Diego, as well. Appreciate everyone that's watching right now. All right, let's go ahead. And this is the one I talked to you about earlier. This is from my friend UAP Jedi. And he says, I'd like to know what's going on with Senator Gillibrand. She's gone dead quiet. And so the question, and I'll just formulate it this way. She seems to have disappeared as far as the UAP issue goes. Representative Tim Burchett talked about the CIA having files on people. You know, they mess up and they got a file. Kind of like your man, J. Edgar Hoover. What would you call him? Pure evil? You got a book, right? There you go.
The G-Man.
The G-Man. He had files on all the politicians and he blackmailed them like crazy. And so, you know, Burchett's kind of must have read that book or read the history. And so he's saying that. And so I guess the question I has is she still in the fight? Has she been compromised, or does she just simply have more pressing issues?
So here's the thing with Gillibrand, and like I'm still trying to feel out exactly where she is, because if everyone remembers, if we go back about 12, 15 months,
Right.
Or no, I can't do math, fewer than that. But last summer, right after Grush dropped his, right after the debrief article came out with Grush, dropping these accusations, Marco Rubio, vice chair of Senate Intel, him and Gillibrand, member of Intel, and actually Gillibrand's one of only 6 senators who's a member of both Armed Services Committee and Intel. Gillibrand came out hot and heavy. Rubio came out hot and heavy. Vowing, telling us in the press, me and then News Nation especially, that they were going to get to the bottom of this. Then something happened with both of them, and I'm still fishing around to see what that was. My sense with Gillibrand, and so everyone kind of has to remember this, as like the Senate is never going to be the House. There's this academic idea called the Houseification of the Senate, where we're getting, more of that bomb-throwing bombast of the House in the Senate, people grinding it to a halt, etc. But so the Senate is just a completely different universe than the House. And like the Capitol itself is a completely different universe than all of Washington. And Washington's a different universe than reality. And so that's where within those dynamics, like last year I asked 100 US senators about David Grush's claims. That was fucking hard. Like so much eye rolling, so much laughing. Like what? Jim Risch, the former chair of Foreign Relations Committee, but current top Republican on it, Idaho Republican senator, he tells me, I don't read UFO stories.
Oh my goodness.
Period. I don't read UFO stories. Oh, cool, Senator. So you don't read stories when the government doesn't know what object is flying overhead? Like, I'm just like, let's define our terms here, sir, because if that's what you're saying, maybe the people of Idaho need to know that so they can vote your ass out.
Right.
But we kind of had the same reaction from Majority Whip Dick Durbin in the Senate, just laughing off UFOs. And so that's where, especially with someone like Gillibrand, who's ran for president, hell, same with Rubio, ran for president, and like their whole job is their public persona, because if their job is to get reelected, they have to constantly be selling themselves. And that's where I think Gillibrand, if anything, she got a little bit out in front of her skates, as they say. And so with her, y'all got to remember, she's kind of your biggest ally and advocate in the Senate.
Right.
Which is not much, but that's in the Senate. Because in those interviews I did with all 100 US senators, I think there was only like 10 to 15 who took it seriously and it was even like on their radar and looking into it. Most of the rest just brushed this thing off. And so that's where, and folks also have to remember, AARO is kind of her baby. And so even though, she might have been in the pocket of Kirkpatrick, or it might have felt like that, Sean Kirkpatrick, the head of AARO, former head of AARO, she also has so much invested in this. And that's where my whole thing at askapol.com, I'm like slowly, like I don't look to any lawmaker for the answers. I look to each lawmaker for what they know / what they'll tell me about what they know. And then I use that to paint like that little picture, part of the tapestry. Well, then I go to another senator and I get a more full-orbed view. And so that's where I'm just slowly taking my time to really try to paint that full tapestry. And with someone like Gillibrand, she still feels engaged. But here, so Rubio, I think what he told me last month was pretty telling on where Gillibrand is. Because Rubio, his frustration finally boiled over with Kirkpatrick, when him doing his like post-AARO dump on everyone tour, which I'm like, oh, now you're talking? Like, would have been helpful if you did that when you actually had power and were, at the helm of this thing. But Rubio, he like rolled his eyes so fucking deep. He was like, well, that's why we created AARO. And so when Rubio said that, look, it's our last interview at askapol.com with Rubio. And the way he phrases it is so interesting because he's basically, the way I read it, he's like, hell, that's the reason we created AARO, to do that thinking for us. So part of my understanding of what Congress was looking for when they started AARO was, for one, kind of to wash their hands. Like, they're like, hey, we feel the pressure from all of you in the public. We know we have to look like we're taking this seriously. So we're going to set up this agency to deal with that. Well, that's blown up in their fucking faces. Well, thank you, Mr. David Grush, for one. But then now the whole fact that these whistleblowers don't trust AARO, Rubio and all of them are like, that's the only reason we created this. We wanted them to be the repository of all these complaints, because I think the unspoken there is their offices keep getting all these complaints, and not just from Joe Schmo public like me. They're getting these complaints from veterans and active duty service members. And so they necessarily have to take those seriously. Pardon me. They necessarily have to look like they're taking those seriously, which is where Rubio's frustration, I really felt it, because he's like kind of admitting, shit, we created AARO to do our thinking for us on this subject, and they failed there. And I think now what those lawmakers are grappling with is, well, shit, we just got AARO 2.5 years ago. It's a new agency within the Pentagon. Now they're like, well, if no one trusts it, do we have to now create another one? And that's where I think, as much as Kirkpatrick's out there, trying to like have his cake and eat it too, shit on everyone in this community. No, there's a growing chorus in Congress that's the fuck you, Sean Kirkpatrick caucus, because he screwed everyone over in this space. First of all the whistleblowers, which are the people Congress actually cared about hearing from. And so we'll see going forward. But like, one thing about Gillibrand, her heart seems to be still with AARO. And that could be as that smoke screen, that Rubio wants,
So you think, just to clarify, so you're saying that it basically was a Project Blue Book 2.0, that they wanted to look like they were doing something, but even Rubio, you think, was that just as to make it look like they're investigating it, but they're really not.
Well, so that's where I don't get that cynical. I think they, especially when it comes to senators, I don't think most of them think there's any there. Really? But yeah, I think for the most, pardon me, in public.
Oh, okay.
In public. Because after Gillibrand and Rubio came out, as I put it, hot and heavy on this subject, part of me does feel like the two of them and others were given a classified briefing where maybe they were shown all the jewels, but it felt like, and I called Gillibrand out on this at the end of last year. Literally, I think my last interview with her at Askapol, right ahead of December 2023, and Gillibrand, she questions me on tape. She goes, "What do you mean? We changed? There was a change of tone." And I was like, "There was a change of tone, ma'am." Sorry, you can't see me right now, but I was like, "Ma'am, I've heard and felt that change of tone." Where, like, especially comparing the Senate to the House. Where in the House, they had David Grush in. And so if anything, in the House, the curiosity and the investigation has grown and grown and grown.
Right.
In the Senate, it's almost the opposite. And for one, the two chambers don't dialogue with each other at all. First time, Senator Martin Heinrich, who's on the Intel committee, he's a senator from New Mexico, hat off to our Albuquerque friend. Heinrich was like, there's a UAP caucus in the House? So like the two chambers just don't dialogue. But that said, when it comes to these classified briefings, they should at least, oh no, I take that back. I was going to say they should at least have the same information, but no, what do we know about the intelligence community? They're not going to bring files and files and files into these briefings. If they know these lawmakers are asking for something here, they're just going to give you that little sliver. And so that's where I wish we had more curiosity in the Senate. But even though there's a lack of curiosity in the Senate, folks like Gillibrand, Rubio, Rounds, and even Warner, because they created AARO, it almost ties them to it. Or no, they're very much tied to it. And they feel a sense of obligation. Well, let me put it this way. I don't know who they're trying to serve, but on the surface, they're trying to serve the servicemen and women who are reporting all these incidents. And so for them to, at the minimum, keep that facade up, but at the maximum, for them to actually hear what our servicemen and women and other pilots are seeing in the field, like they can't walk that back. And so that's where I think there's a lot of frustration with AARO, because I wasn't saying it in the cynical sense, but Congress outsourced its thinking, the Senate outsourced its thinking on UFOs, UAPs to AARO. Not like it could be cynical, like, oh, they washed their hands of it. That could be what they did. But I feel like it's more so, these are busy folks. Like Gillibrand, she's kind of made her name for herself, taking on the Pentagon for sexual assault for, within the ranks. And like, she's gone toe to toe with the Pentagon on that and like actually made good progress. She's also got a lot of military bases and contracting facilities in New York. So she's like, gotta please those beasts. I think she's also like big on stablecoin and crypto. So like a senator's portfolio is sweeping and massive. Again, she's on both Armed Services Committee and Intelligence Committee, and then even on other committees on top of that. And so every U.S. senator and even House members are going to be totally divided with their time and with their issues. Not in the bad sense, but she'll outsource her work on armed services to her LA, legislative assistant, or what is the other one? LD, legislative director. She'll outsource her thinking to that person who she really trusts in her office. And so that's kind of how I view AARO. Lawmakers, even if the ones trying to wash their hands of this, they wanted to set up something that at least looked legit. And that's where they're all kind of like, AARO failed us, because like, you're not a good brain trust. For one, we don't trust you. And for one, service members don't trust you. After what happened with Kirkpatrick, most lawmakers no longer trust AARO. And now, the interesting thing this year, I've not talked to a single lawmaker, UAP caucus or Senate, who's even talked to Timothy Phillips, the interim head at AARO. Part of that's because, we've had a bunch of government shutdowns. Like literally, Congress got back into session at the start of the year. Government shutdown hanging over their head. They kicked the can until what? Last week, government shutdown hanging over their heads until they funded the government, and now they're gone for 2 weeks. And so once they get back, they're going to have a lot less excuses with me and us our little army at Askapol, because to me it's fascinating, but like in the fuck you sort of way, and pardon my French, but it's like, wait. How come none of you have asked for a meeting with Timothy Phillips? Like, you guys allowed, like, and this is where I'm always playing devil's advocate. I'm kind of talking to myself because it's like, wait, you guys set up AARO to be your brain trust. Now Kirkpatrick's gone, but none of you are doing oversight on this new guy. Like, how the hell can you trust the last report he put out? And I think that's the rub. I don't think any of them were looking for any information from that last report. Now, they might have all gleaned a ton of info from the classified version of that, but the declassified version, most of them just shrugged it off. And so I think those lawmakers, Gillibrand and Rubio, I think they're kind of annoyed to pissed off because they're like, shit, AARO didn't work as like the mini smoke screen or smoke screen to, library assistant that they wanted. They didn't want to have to do that work. They didn't want to have to stare these issues in the face. But now they kind of do, because AARO is what?
Well, that kind of leads into the first question that I had. And I think you've somewhat answered it, but just to make sure everybody gets this, after the AARO report came out, how did the people in Congress talk to you about it? Were they not talking about it at all? Or were they saying, okay, we don't believe this crap, or is it just, what was it? What were you hearing when it came out?
None of them fucking read it.
Really?
None of them read it. Even tonight, once I'm done with this, I'm going to drop, thank you, intern Waylon, and former intern Andre, because right after I'm done with this, I'm going to drop our new Jared Moskowitz, congressman, Democrat from Florida, member of the UAP caucus.
Yeah.
Moskowitz, right before he jetted for this congressional recess, they got a 2-week recess right now for Easter. I think it was last Friday. He's about to hop the plane, and I asked him about that report, and he was like, you know what? I actually haven't read it yet. And what he said is, good reminder, I'm going to read that on the plane right now. And so that's where I'm intrigued on that, because members of the UAP caucus, most of them are more junior. None of them are on Intel. Only Nancy Mace is on Armed Services Committee, which I'm still figuring this out, but it kind of feels to me like members of Armed Services Committee kind of have a higher classification just built in than other members. And it's kind of like, oh, the speaker or the leadership trusts those folks more, so they put them on there. So they might not have a formal clearance process like you would do as a civilian or whatever. But I'm curious. And then again, remember, these House members, these members of Congress, this is not their main or driving issue. And again,
that's what I was going to
threats, but with threats of government shutdowns hanging over, so I've been covering Congress 18 years. This is the strangest Congress out of 9 strange Congresses that I've covered. This one is strange. For one, they didn't just shut down Congress last year. They didn't just shut down the government last year. They shut down Congress for 3 weeks when Speaker McCarthy was ousted. And when Speaker Johnson and them come back from this 2-week recess, there's a threat that Marjorie Taylor Greene pulled the trigger on her motion to vacate. There's a threat that Speaker Johnson might be ousted. And so there's all these internal politics, that have nothing to do with any of these really serious issues. And not just UAPs and all this, but I mean, if you care about this cancer initiative, you can't talk about the cancer initiative. There's just been no space in this Congress for lawmakers to really breathe and get their Congress on. And part of that's because we're in the midst of the 2024 election, and we have been since 2 Januaries ago. We have been since January 2023. And so I'm intrigued, and I'm kind of curious with members of the UAP caucus, especially, like, wait, why didn't, when that new declassified AARO report came out, why wasn't that just like the first thing you wanted to read? Because honestly, it wasn't just Moskowitz, it was also Nancy Mace. She hadn't read it. And like when I talked to her a couple weeks ago, she was like, yeah, I'm going to get to it. And so that's where I'm curious if all of them aren't dying to get to it because they're like, AARO's useless. Like, why would we rush to read the bullshit that they're going to send us?
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. You nailed it right there. That maybe they didn't read it because it was a foregone conclusion and they knew it.
And so that's where I'm still trying. I tread very slowly and methodically, and if anything, I've like felt embarrassment from Mace and Moskowitz, and I think that's why I didn't put out the Mace interview where it's just real quick. But she was just like, "Oh, I haven't read it yet," and then and then I'll go to a different topic. And so I'm curious because honestly, if AARO has proven itself that useless that even members of the UAP caucus see their declassified report as like meaningless, as in something, because they care about the issue, obviously, but they don't care about that report.
Because I mean, conclusion. Let me share with you something I heard from Ross Coulthart on Weapon. I Need to Know. He was talking about a couple weeks ago, and I don't know if you got a chance to see him when he was there, but he was in DC, and he was looking at his phone, and he didn't identify who the senior congressmen were, but they said, "Hey, are you that guy that brought David Grush in and the Need to Know podcast?" And he said these were guys that weren't even a part of the UAP discussion. These are kind of guys on the sidelines, I guess. But they told him that they knew that report was BS, that they could smell BS when they saw it. They could literally tell what it was. And so that's part of my question, as I was trying to get to, is it sounds to me, at least there's a chance from what you just described that they're going, why, I'll read this when I get more time, because right now I know it's a foregone conclusion. I know they're going to try to, to some degree, pull a Project Blue Book on us all over again.
This also reminds me of, my own personal fuck up here, because it was after I first asked Gillibrand, and I just asked the wrong question, because I probably shouldn't have asked, hey, have you read the report? I should have asked, hey, what did you think of that report? I mean, because lawmakers are lazy. And again, they have these staffs who they outsource their thinking on education policy to that person. Outsource their thinking on veterans affairs issues to this person on their staff. And sometimes that's for a really good reason, because like that member of their staff is a veteran. That member of their staff was an educator. So yeah, you want to talk to them about education policy. And so that's where sometimes, as warped as Congress is, it does make a little sense sometimes. If I say that too much, throw rocks at my head, because no, this town is warped. But so that's where I'm curious if I would have asked that question differently. Well, actually, no, I'm a sadist / masochist. So yeah, I like to see him squirm. So I'm like, yeah, did you do your homework? Did you read the freaking report? But I probably should have been a little gentler and been like, hey, what did you think of that new report? Because they might have gotten talking points from their staff and bullet points, ... Because all these lawmakers say like, oh, we're going to read the bill. We're not going to read the bill. And if anything, it would be dumb and a waste of your time to read the bill. Because what is a bill doing? Most bills, legislative text, is actually like notes to people in the federal bureaucracy saying, hey, we need to change Title III CA of this. Like, reading the bill sometimes makes no sense. It's if you actually go to those addendums or portions of it that are like a little bit hidden. Because the bill itself might say, hey, this is in section 3CA of the government code. Well, when you go to what looks like, just meaningless 3CA, you might be overhauling an entire agency or gutting an entire agency, which you would never know from just reading the bill. And so that's where, yeah, I wish I would have asked that better.
Is there any, any
but I'm
truth?
so glad I made him sweat.
That's good. That's good. Is there any truth to the idea that the staffers do the main reading and then they find the highlights and then they get that instead of them having to try to read every single document out there, just to point out the highlights? This is what important. This is what you need to pay attention to.
These days, it's just first thing you do. And this is what they should do. Control F. Because these bills, and especially, and this is where the concerns from many Republicans, especially in the House, were very warranted. You guys are like, our federal government just had less than 72 hours to pass $1.2 trillion on our behalf. I'm like, hey guys, you can take a month or two, or in a usual Congress, take a full year to think about how exactly you're going to spend 1.2 trillion of our fucking dollars.
Yeah.
And so and that's where just the broader dysfunction, again, of this Congress just hangs over everything. And it's not just that Senate's Democrats, House is Republicans. There's this like deeper dysfunction that you all see, you all feel on a daily basis, that's just like woven into the fabric of Congress as an institution. And that's where I feel like the more you all, especially engaged listeners, readers, viewers, all that, when you guys come smart, when you know your stuff, and if anything, folks in the UAP community, I say, hey, sometimes don't bring all your big books and don't bring all your intellect, because a lot of you all are more like masters or PhDs in these topics. Much of Congress, like, they're still learning how to put their training wheels on. And like with that, they need help from mom.
I wanted to hit a couple of things that you brought up recently. And one was about Senator Warner. Somebody asked him about David Grush, and didn't he say something like, who?
I did.
Yeah.
Who? Yep. Twice.
Like,
who?
But you clarified that he has to know who David Grush is, correct?
And so that's the thing. And with this, I give Warner a little bit of a shadow of a doubt, because he was rushing to catch a tram. But he had pissed me off so much the day before, kind of laughing in our faces, in your faces.
Was that?
That I wasn't going to take no for an answer. So he was like, hey, I've got to run to this thing. And I was like, cool. And that's where I decided to change tracks, because asking about UAPs to Intel Chair Warner in the Senate, he was just dismissive and was like, blah, blah, blah. Well, so I was like, all right, how do I get him? And I was like, oh, I doubt he knows that a member of the UAP caucus or members of the UAP caucus in the House are trying to actually hire David Grush on their staff. And I was like, ooh, I bet that'll like dislodge him a little bit, and it could, get him to be like freak out if he actually like cared about these issues. Like my whole plan to, show that, the emperor has no clothes, or actually I was doing it to try to get him to be like, look, these are serious issues. The House is doing this to bypass all this bullshit. And Warner's response was like, what? Who? And that's where, if I had gone through his staff, he would have gotten the briefing paper. But that's why it's sometimes so beautiful to not go through their staffs. Because what do we see? Warner, unless he's briefed, does not know the name David Grush. Like, he's familiar with David Grush. Him and I have talked about David Grush. So yeah, he's fully, and his staff questioned David Grush in the skiff, So like, yes, he knows him on one level, but there, just man on the street, Warner has no idea who this guy is. And I think that is very telling, because it shows the level of dismissiveness.
He's not
like he just backhanded him. Like he backhanded the whole topic. And that's where, again, I'm changing my language when talking to him specifically, because for him, he can easily dismiss this whole conversation as, no, I've never seen E.T. You know, if he's to be believed, we can say, all right, he's never seen E.T., anything like that. Like for him, when you bring up the term, to circle back to the start of this, when you bring up the term UAP, for him, it just means, oh, little green men or whatever. And for him, that's something that you can just dismiss and like laugh off like X-Files. But that's where, with him, I'm learning I have to use different language that's more grounded, because every senator you ask about this, especially on intel and armed services, or pardon me, not even armed services, but the intel senators, they're interested in the UAP issue because of intrusions. And this is where it gets scarier. Because of intrusions over U.S. airspace, and especially sensitive military sites. And like the interview we just dropped yesterday with Senator Kaine from Virginia. And that's kind of why I asked Senator Tim Kaine about, because he had just questioned in armed services, questioned the head of the Northern Command and the head of Southern Command in a public hearing about sightings over Langley Air Force Base. And I'm like, all right, Kaine is taking this seriously, talking about UAPs in the true sense of the term. Like, we don't know what these are. So that's where I was going at Kaine to get leverage with Warner, because they're the same state. And in that, it became very telling, because even Kaine, like Gillibrand, when she was out west, saying, yeah, the Air Force has no idea what's hovering over our bases. Kaine, that conversation, he made it feel like it was more drones and like it was more foreign actors. Now, he said he couldn't. I was like, but do you guys, like, I was like, in a classified setting, did they assure you that the military, knows what the fuck is up there? And he couldn't answer. He said he couldn't answer that publicly, but he was just like, yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to answer that. And he repeated it. I don't know if I'm allowed to answer that, which made me think, all right, so you heard something there. So now I take what he told me once Congress is back, and I'll like bounce that off another senator, but with some things redacted. And that's where I slowly unravel their sweaters.
It's kind of cool that you did that, because in a way that's always, I mean, you know who Lou Elizondo is. A lot of people that were, wanting aliens to be good and kind, and I'm kind of in that camp myself a little bit, but they did not like the fact that Lou Elizondo put it in a threat, threat to airspace, threat to air safety. But what you just said was, if it hadn't been presented as a threat, we wouldn't have probably anything going in the Senate, because that's the framework by which they can use it. They can talk about it, because they're not going to talk about, which is, I'd love to have you on someday and talk about the psychology. What are these guys so afraid of? What is it? What's wrong with using the word UAP? What's wrong with using the word alien? We can find out whether it is or it isn't, but we can't even use the word.
I'm like, what's even wrong with the term UFO? Because having these conversations, it would actually be a lot more helpful if we all still had the same terminology around UFO. And then we could also talk about UAPs, which for some lawmakers, especially on the UAP caucus, if I'm asking them about UFOs in the traditional old school sense, I'm using the term UFO. But when I'm talking about UAPs, it's something different. And so, again, circling back to the beginning, I think that's part of why we saw NASA use and adopt the term UAP, and why we saw the intelligence community use a little bit of a different definition for the same term, but seeing all of them ditch UFO together just confuse things. And like, remember, for us, we're cued into this. for Joe and Jane Public, like, they're not going to know what the heck we're even talking about when we use UAP. And so, in a sense, that government communications head fake was successful. Like, that confused the heck out of the public because it confused the heck out of senators and House members, which,
and it could
confused the heck out of me.
Yeah, well, I like basically what Brooke to himself says. He said that's why Ryan Graves has to use air safety as his in, because the Air Force has the response to those claims, unlike UFOs. And so you can say air safety, you can say things penetrating our airspace, but it's an uphill road as you're learning in DC. If you use other terminology, and I think it's great, you figured it out. You figured out how you're going to get the information.
Figuring.
Yeah. You just got to frame it out. You got to frame it the right way. Now, another thing I wanted to talk to you, I know we're getting close to running out of time, but there's a lot of talk about getting a select committee in the House, the importance of getting that. Yeah. And you were the one that I saw it on Ask a Poll, where you had the letter from Representative Burleson. He sent it to Mike Johnson and Akeem Jeffries. Johnson is the speaker. Jeffries is the minority leader, if my understanding is right. And yes, you saw that, right? And you put that up there. But I have a source, and I talked to him today, and they're not in the intel community, but they're a person who's very much involved in this kind of stuff, and a very respected person. And he said, and I want to get your opinion on this, he said that there is about a 0 chance it'll happen pre-disclosure. There's really no hope of getting a select committee in the House.
See, part of me agrees with that, because, yeah, why would, for one, in this Congress with these dynamics, why would, especially people in the Gang of Eight, and for folks who don't know, the Gang of Eight, that's the head of the intel committees, minority majority in the Senate, minority majority in the House, and then Speaker, Senate Majority Leader, and then the minority leaders. So that's the Gang of Eight. Why would they want to cede any power over this, et cetera, ... But as I keep kind of gently prodding, because I'm a reporter, I have no dogs in this fight, but I keep kind of pushing and questioning the members of the UAP caucus in the House, because when Congress left, there were 2 votes that Republicans could spare in the House. 2 votes that, Speaker Johnson could spare in the House and still pass a bill with just Republicans, which in this hyper bullshit Congress, hyper-partisan Congress, they just want to pass it with their bill. So, like, it's a failure for Speaker Johnson to have to reach across the aisle and work with Democrats in this bizarre world of Washington. But so I'm like, and so now that we know the head of the China Select Committee, Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin, he just announced not just that he's retiring, but that he's retiring early, I think within the next month. So when he leaves to go to, of course, a defense contracting firm, I forget which one, but when he leaves, Johnson's only going to have 1 vote he can spare in the House.
Wow. Which
part of that, I don't know. To me, those mathematics mean any lawmaker who wants a bridge in their district, who wants, a select UAP caucus, now's your time to demand it. Because even a lot of these lawmakers, I was even kind of curious whether this was coming up when Speaker McCarthy was being ousted, because Speaker McCarthy, there was the 8 House Republicans who ousted him, including 3 members of the UAP caucus, or at least three-ish, because Gates isn't quite a part of the UAP caucus, but he is. But that's where these lawmakers are more empowered now than they're ever going to be. And so yeah, well, I agree that, yeah, they'll never get it. We're about to be down to one vote in the House of Representatives, the chamber of 435 lawmakers, heading into an election where if Republicans want to maintain control of the House, they have to pretend, or they have to govern a little bit, it seems. And so they at least have to pretend to govern. And so if you had a handful of lawmakers, say a block of 6 members of a certain caucus, say, we're not going to support you. I mean, because remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene, MTG, she's got a motion to vacate the chair hanging over Speaker Johnson's head right now. That motion to vacate, yeah, it's wonky DC parlance. That's the reason we no longer have a Speaker McCarthy, because the motion to vacate worked. And so with that hanging over Johnson's head, and even someone like Tim Burchett, co-chair of the UAP caucus, he, right before they left, you know, there was a big scrum around him. Like, we have another exclusive with him that I'm going to drop in the next couple of days after we drop a couple other ones.
Oh, wow.
But Burchett, like, he always has like a big scrum report. He's like this nice, you know, folksy Southern gentleman. So like the whole press corps loves him. You know, Democrats love him. Like, he's just kind of like everyone's favorite person on Capitol Hill. Oh, he's making jokes. Just fun guy, and answers our questions. We take him seriously. So like there's a scrum of like what, 50, 60 reporters around him. So I always wait in the wings, or I'm always taking pictures for Askapol, and then, you know, recording it too. But then once he's done talking about that more like, you know, MSM news, then I usually walk back to his office with him. That's where I get him exclusively with the UAP stuff. And Burchett, he seems like, or no, what he was saying, because I heard nuance in what he was saying. He was like, as of today, no, I wouldn't vote. If the vote was held today, I'd vote for Speaker Johnson. And I finally was like, well, sir, it sounds like you're leaving an out for if the vote is held in 2 weeks, when you guys get back from this Easter recess that you're giving yourselves. It sounds like you might be open then to ousting, I almost said McCarthy, to ousting Speaker Johnson. And he was basically like, yeah, my thoughts, that statement might change in the next 2 weeks. So when Speaker Johnson comes back, even UAPs aside, you might see his speakership challenged. And if that happens, whoever, even if it's Johnson claiming, you know, the gavel or whatever, claiming the title, he's going to be needing rank and file Republicans, each one of them, because he can only lose one vote. And if Johnson's ousted and then someone else is in vying for the crown of shame for speakers in the House, I mean, lawmakers have a lot of power. Republicans in the House have more power now than they're potentially ever going to have again.
I'll tell you what, Matt, I really appreciate this. Is why I wanted to have a podcast with someone like you on. I mean, you got some really good insight. You put some things together that I don't know that a lot of people would understand. You know, the dynamics of basically Burchett, if he wanted to really push the issue, he has the ability to do it. And by the way, when you talk to him, let him know I've asked him to come on my podcast, and I'd love to have him on. And so if you get a chance, just mention, I'll treat him with the utmost respect, like I do you.
The other, and remember, this is where I'm always playing devil's advocate. It could also blow up in these members' faces. And so that's where they're on the inside. It was interesting with Lou Alessandro coming and talking to Congress or members of the Conservative Opportunity Society last month or whatever. It was interesting hearing members who aren't cued in on these issues, like Ralph Norman, South Carolina Republican. He was the only Republican in the Congress to endorse Nikki Haley for governor. He was the one who asked Lou in, and he said like his mind was really expanded with that. And so these members of the UAP caucus know the internal levers more than me. So like maybe it would be really foolish of them to demand that right now. You know, I don't know the internal dynamics, but what I do know is if that's their top demand right now, could be the time to do it. Again, it could blow up in their faces. And I'm not a member of Congress. I just throw stones at glass houses for a living.
One last question, and then I will let you go because I said we'd keep it to about an hour. We're a little bit over that. But
Yes,
I
sir.
think the question that a lot of people are going to ask, given that Michael Johnson kind of either gave in or agreed upon the Schumer Rounds Amendment, gutting it, basically taking eminent domain out, which seems crazy to me for all those guys that don't believe it. I mean, why in the world would you make a stink like that over something that doesn't exist? If eminent domain over something that doesn't exist, why would you do that? But I don't understand, why they've taken that stance there.
See, with that one, I'm still fishing around on what exactly happened because I don't have it confirmed from anyone where that came from. And I know a lot of people are suspicious and think it's Mike Turner. Yeah, everyone's suspicious of him for very, very good reasons. That said, Turner, so I know Jim Himes fairly well, the top Democrat on House Intel, and he's texted me back to correct what someone else on Intel told us, our community on UAPs. So he's engaged enough and he trusts me enough. And I take him as a straight enough shooter, which means I take him as 1,000% indifferent on this issue. I believe Himes. It was interesting to actually see him engage on X or Twitter on this issue with folks. So he watches it. But I do kind of trust him when he says it's never come up in his conversations with Turner. That said, that could mean that Turner is 1,000% empowered to go this issue alone. If your ranking Democrat doesn't give a shit about it, well, boom, you're empowered. You got all the power. So if you're not bringing, Turner could be back channeling it. The NDAA discussions at the end of last year, Speaker Johnson just got in.
Yeah.
Speaker Johnson, if he's inquisitive at all, just got to read the JFK files for the first time. He probably didn't, because what did he have to do? He had a lot of fucking fundraising to do. And I think he had 2 or 3 Altria fundraisers. Cigarette company. Don't smoke, but I think these cats. So Johnson had mad fundraising to do. Even at the start of this year, he was in Burchett's district because he had to fundraise for 3 or so Tennessee Republicans. So when it came to the NDAA, he's either signing whatever in front of him. I doubt Johnson even raised a single concern that was his own. I doubt he ever read the House passed NDAA bill, let alone Schumer's amendment. He could have, but it's just highly, highly doubtful. If anything, he was really leaning on McCarthy's staff at that point. And McCarthy and Turner are big allies. And so that's where I have washed no one's hands of what happened with that. Everyone's guilty until proven innocent in my book. It's not a court of law. This is congressional reporter politics. And so I'm just not convinced. And because the other interesting thing about that episode was the head of the House Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers from Alabama. When I talked to him in the hall when he was leaving that one public hearing or conference committee they had on the NDAA, Chair Rogers asked, he knew Schumer's amendment, and he told me, and I said, ask a poll. He said he believed it was redundant. And so he not only knew Schumer's amendment, and remember, when I brought Schumer's amendment up to UAP caucus members,
I think we lost your mic. Yeah. I think we lost your mic for some reason. Your picture's still there. We'll give it a second to come back. We're going to be shutting this one down anyway. But for some reason, the mic disappeared. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do, Matt. Doesn't look like your mic's going to get fixed. I'll just thank you for coming on and let you know I thought this was a great podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you coming on and giving us this hour and 15 minutes. You have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Hey, Matt. Yes, that's that. Anyway, just hope that you enjoyed this podcast. Hopefully, the next one on Wednesday, and I shouldn't even say hopefully, because I'm sure it will be, we're going to have Darcy Weir on. My friend Rob Heatherly is going to help me co-host it. And then Darcy's going to bring his friend Andy Marciel on it from New York UAP discussion. So it's going to be a great podcast. And so it will be next Wednesday, and it will be 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. And forgive me for my friends in the UK and those down under. I think on the link itself, I put the time for you guys, for those in Sydney and those in London. But it'll be in the description. But anyway, I want to thank everyone for being here. If you're not a subscriber, let me just go ahead and encourage you to hit that subscribe button. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here and being a part of this podcast. Thanks.